So, what does a person driving a heavy forklift in a packed warehouse have in common with a cybersecurity expert who's protecting a company's entire digital network? It really does sound like the beginning of a bad joke, right? But the answer? Well, it actually tells us something really important about how we manage risk in today's world. Let's dive into this surprising connection.
Okay, on the surface, you couldn't imagine two more different jobs. One is moving physical stuff, pallets, boxes, products. The other is managing the flow of digital assets, things like data, passwords, and company secrets. But when you get right down to it, their core job is exactly the same. They are both trusted operators, and their mission is to move valuable things through a complex, sometimes dangerous environment without anything going wrong.
And this is where the stakes get incredibly high, because when they do their jobs perfectly, everything just works. The supply chain keeps moving, your data is safe, and business just hums along. You don't even notice them. But one little slip up, a forklift crash can shut down a warehouse for hours, costing a fortune. And a single data breach? We're talking millions of dollars and destroying the trust you've built with your customers for years. The pressure on these folks is just immense. So, when the stakes are that high, you obviously can't just hand someone the keys, whether they're the keys to a forklift or the keys to your network. You see, experts in these jobs aren't born, they're made, and it all starts with a rock-solid foundation of training. This is the million-dollar question for any company, isn't it? How do you actually prepare someone for a job where success means being invisible, but one mistake could be a complete disaster? It's not about crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. It's about systematically and deliberately building people who are prepared for anything. And believe it or not, the path looks almost identical for both. First, you've got to master your environment. That could be the physical layout of the warehouse with all its tricky corners, or the digital architecture of the network. Second, you learn the procedures, the step-by-step playbook for how to do things safely. Third, you get tested on it to prove you know your stuff. And finally, and this is so important, it's all about constant practice and getting better. Because a change in the warehouse layout is just like a new software bug. The threats are always changing. And what I find really fascinating here is how both of these fields depend on standardized playbooks. For our forklift operator, that means following super strict OSHA guidelines on how to operate safely. For our cyber expert, it means following well-established frameworks like NIST or ISO. And these aren't just helpful hints, they are proven, battle-tested systems designed specifically to reduce human error and set a clear baseline for how to operate safely. So training gets you in the door, but the job itself is always moving, always changing. Dangers don't exactly send you a calendar invite. So let's talk about how these operators go from being prepared to actively preventing problems in the moment.
They say the best incident is the one that never happens in the first place. But how do you actually stop it? Well, it all comes down to being aware of your surroundings and having the right tools to see trouble coming before it turns into a total crisis.
And this table just lays out the parallels perfectly. In the physical world, proactive audits mean doing regular safety checks on the forklift and the warehouse floor. In the digital world, that's what we call a vulnerability scan, probing the network for weak spots. And for real-time monitoring, a modern warehouse might use AI-powered cameras to spot unsafe driving. That is the exact same idea as a cybersecurity team using an intrusion detection system to spot a hacker trying to get into the network. But here's the real key takeaway. It's not just about checking off boxes on a list. Real safety, whether it's physical or digital, comes from a totally different mindset. It's about actually understanding the risks you're facing and actively managing them, not just doing the bare minimum to pass an audit. It's about shifting from asking, "Are we compliant?" to asking the much, much more important question, "Are we actually secure?" Now, this whole comparison, it's more than just a cool thought experiment. It actually holds a really powerful lesson for anyone in a leadership role who wants to build a stronger, more resilient organization. It's about creating a unified culture of risk. So what does that even mean? A risk management culture is what happens when everybody in the organization, from the person on the warehouse floor all the way up to the CEO, understands that protecting the company's assets is part of their job. It's a shared mindset that gets that physical and digital threats aren't in separate, neat little boxes anymore. So, how do you actually build a culture like that? Well, you invest in great training for everybody. You start to connect your physical and digital monitoring systems because a break-in can easily become a data breach. You create one standard way to respond to any incident, whether it's a chemical spill or a ransomware attack. And maybe most importantly, you empower your operators, your people on the front lines, with clear rules and the authority they need to make safe decisions. And why does all this matter? Because at the end of the day, a company that's great at managing risk is a company that people can count on. It protects its hard-earned reputation, it avoids incredibly expensive disruptions, and it keeps the trust of its customers and its partners. In today's world, that is a huge competitive edge. So, I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. Think about your own organization. Who are your critical operators of risk? They might not be called forklift drivers or cyber experts, but who are the people you trust to handle your most valuable assets day in and day out? And are you giving them the training, the tools, and the culture they need to keep everything safe?